Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma, and I've got Melanie and Nick with me today, and we're going to be talking about the idea of foresight. But before I get to any of the questions that I've got for both of you guys, can you do a quick intro? And I'm just going to go Melanie first, and then Nick will come to you.
Sounds good. My name is Melanie Subin. I am the Managing Director of Future Today Institute. We are a strategic foresight advisory firm, which we'll explain in a few minutes. And my background is actually in insurance and insurance market research. So this is an area that is near and dear to my heart.
Okay. And then Nick, your turn.
Great. Thanks for having us. So I'm Nick Bartlett. I'm a director at Future Today Institute. I also lead our insurance practice. And much like Melanie, I have a background in insurance research as well as strategy at a handful of different organizations across the marketplace. So excited to be here and chat.
Great. Well, Melanie, you just gave us that nice little idea that we were going to talk more about this, but can you get us started for anybody that's unfamiliar with the term of foresight? Can you share kind of that 101 definition just to make sure we're all kind of operating in the same direction?
Yeah. Strategic foresight is a disciplined and systematic approach to identify where to play and how to win. And Future Today Institute has a proprietary methodology that we use that combines trends and signals, the things that we can know, with uncertainties, the things that we cannot know about the future. And the whole point of strategic foresight is to ensure organizational resiliency, to be better prepared for unforeseen disruption, and to make better decisions for the future.
So then, Nick, kind of taking a look at where we see foresight being used successfully and maybe not so successfully in organizations, can you kind of help us understand that recipe of where we can use it and maybe some pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in today's world, we're seeing foresight is still an evolving process and becoming an evolving part of a lot of organizations, but it's most impactful when it's embedded into the broader strategy process. So, when we've seen issues where folks, try to do this as a one-off, it sits in a very tight silo within the organization. Sometimes it gets buried in an innovation office or an innovation practice. And unfortunately, in situations like that, it tends to wither and just die. We also see that happen a lot too when it's just one person that's responsible for foresight. So really the greatest success we see is when this has become an enterprise-wide competency. As much as it's a practice, it's also a mindset, thinking about the future and thinking about how the world could change and things could impact you. So if we think in particular about, the insurance industry, we see them sitting in kind of this middle space that I guess we would describe it as, where probably not as far behind as folks that are doing something like very, very traditional manufacturing, where they're so focused on their day-to-day and maybe their next quarter, and not so far out thinking as, some of the big tech companies that we see that are developing and creating designs that aren't going to be in the marketplace for another 5 to 10 years. So we in particular see a lot of interest and are trying to help a lot of organizations try to move in that middle space where they're, thinking a little bit about the future, but we want to get them thinking past 12 months, and maybe thinking to 24 months, and then let's think about the next 5 years and move from there. So organizations that can get to that point, we're seeing far more success, across the marketplace with those types of companies.
Nick, I feel like you're coming after my heart a little bit, talking about the idea that insurance isn't the only one that suffers with some of this, and that there are other industries that aren't necessarily looking out as far into the future. I feel like, having worked cross vertically, that's one conversation I have a lot within the insurance industry is just because banking makes it seem like they've got slick apps doesn't mean that they're always doing exactly what they should be. Look to other industries like manufacturing and realize we're not alone. The problems that we have are not unique. I mean, there's nuances, but they're not fully unique to us. So I love to hear that coming from you guys, especially watching trends and kind of trying to help other people move through this process. So where I want to go kind of to end our conversation is to tap into both of you guys' and your thought process on what trends you're watching and what you think other people should be keeping an eye on. So I'm going to take myself out for a second and you guys decide who wants to speak first and maybe get like the most exciting trend out there. But if you guys could both share a little bit about what you're looking at today.
I'll go first. So I picked 3 that I think insurance companies are probably not paying as much attention to. I think the first is deep fake technology. So I'm sure that most insurance companies are paying attention to this to some extent. If you're not familiar with deep fake technology, it is essentially AI created content, usually videos, but it could also just be audio that seem extremely real, but represents entirely fake content or imagery. And particularly for insurers, this is going to pose new challenges in fraud detection. There are already cases where, for example, employees of companies have received phone calls seemingly from leaders authorizing expenditure of large sums of money. The person approves the spend and then finds later that it was a deepfake phone call or video. So this is something that we're already seeing companies be challenged with. It's a new type of loss that insurance companies may not be equipped to handle if they don't stay on top of that cutting edge AI technology and also authentication methods to kind of safeguard the integrity of claims processes. The second one that I chose is mostly for life insurance, advances in synthetic biology. So things like gene editing or artificial life forms. There are a lot of new and novel risks and ethical considerations that are going to come to the forefront of medicine, healthcare, aging care. There are breakthroughs that could lead to unforeseen health risks or new environmental impacts or new biosecurity threats. And this is a very new and emerging space in science. And so just like deepfakes, insurers are going to have to make sure that they stay on top of the technology and the science to stay well educated on it so that they can anticipate those liabilities and those risks and also be prepared to address them. And then the third that I'll throw out is space tourism and commercial space travel. So this is a whole new frontier of risk. There are new activities that are taking place in space or that are going to be taking place in space relatively soon. There's high potential for accidents, new health issues, damage to expensive spacecraft, new liabilities and risks in space tourism or long-term health effects, technical risks with manufacturing items in space. So there's just a whole litany of new risks that could emerge. And I think these are 3 areas, deepfake technology and synthetic biology and space tourism that probably feel pretty far out there or really nascent. Maybe insurance companies feel like they're a little bit too new for them to have to worry about yet. But these are areas where there's already a lot of activity and development happening, and insurance companies should definitely be watching them and staying on top of that technology.
One in particular isn't new. It's something that we've been talking about for many, many years, and the technology has existed, is digital twins. So thinking about creating a digital visualization of not only physical items or physical spaces like a building, but also now there's the capability to digitize your process or your entire value chain in many instances. So you could visualize and start to run simulations on trucking routes and different aspects of your supply chain, in addition to basically being able to experiment and see in real time how you could adjust a facility or a manufacturing plant. I think there's a lot of opportunities for customers of insurance carriers to leverage this technology to make their operations better. But if insurers are able to tap into that data and tap into that level of knowledge, that's going to help them understand risks far better than they do today. You'll actually be able to see inside an operation rather than just taking somebody's word for it off that, 3 times photocopied Accord form that's been scratched out 6 times. Moving a little bit more towards, not necessarily cutting edge, but a little bit more nascent than we've seen before, is the real expansion of drone delivery technologies. And I mean both in the air and on the ground. So this is expanding quite a bit as we have a lot of conversations about last mile delivery and kind of shortening the supply chain. But I feel like a lot of the conversations we have with folks, they're not considering some of the liabilities that are going to emerge or increase based on the usage of these different types of vehicles effectively. What is going to happen when there's a collision overhead in a neighborhood? Or do we see existing technologies like a carrier is actually, examining a neighborhood after a hurricane, and a delivery drone runs into them? Or we have instances where someone flies that drone inappropriately and causes damage in another manner. So there's a lot cropping up there that just isn't really being discussed across the organization, probably as broadly as we think it should be. And the last one, looking probably much more into the future, although we never know quite exactly when these things are going to happen, is quantum computing and all that, kind of touches that. That is going to have such a dramatic impact on algorithms, cybersecurity, basically every facet and aspect of computing. It's going to help expedite analysis of current paradigms and identify new solutions and enable a number of new ways that organizations can become more effective. But also it's going to dramatically increase the ability for people to break into systems in the digital world. So we'll probably see, hopefully, in concert with some of those, kind of bad habits cropping up, also a lot of folks working on the white hat side of things and developing some cybersecurity protocols to, counteract that. But certainly that will have a dramatic impact on the cyber industry. And I think those of us that have worked in the insurance space before know that despite everyone's best intentions and best efforts over the past couple decades to really grow that into a substantive product, there's a lot of unknowns that still exist there, and certainly a lot of room for improvement across the board.
I can say, honestly, space travel was not on my bingo card for the conversation today, but you're right. For us to be able to provide services surrounding this kind of thing, we have to be thinking a number of years out in advance. And then the other thing, Nick, you mentioned the idea of drone deliveries. I think so many people were so focused on drones and whether they were going to replace adjusters early on that once that didn't happen, we all kind of forgot that they existed in the industry, and you don't have many conversations around it. But yeah, what happens if it drops a package on somebody and it hits them, and whose responsibility is that? We should be having these discussions. So I really appreciate you guys kind of taking us outside of our typical thought process and providing some food for thought for everybody. And you guys have a conference coming up with SIR that you're going to be speaking at. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we are going to be speaking at the Society for Insurance Research, their conference that's coming up in a few weeks. This is, again, kind of coming back home for Nick and I, that insurance research is where we came from. And that was really what sort of built up our capability in Foresight. So we will be talking about some of the trends that we talked about today and a few other trends that we think insurance companies should be watching. And we will also be walking attendees through our Foresight process and kind of going through it together. Our goal is for insurance companies to be equipped with the Foresight tools that they need to make better decisions. So we'll practice that together a little bit in our session.
Well, great. So if you're not already, make sure that you follow both Nick and Melanie on LinkedIn. And if you are able to join them, I believe the event is in Boston, be sure to check that out as well. But thank you both for joining me for the conversation, and everybody for watching, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.